King David, the second king of Israel.
He was a man who was a brilliant musician. He was a poet in his heart. But combined with that, he was a military genius and a great administrator.
King David was, according to the Bible, a man after God's own heart. Discover more about the kings of Israel as we examine the life of David, King of Power, on this day of discovery. This is Jerusalem, in the land of the Bible. Jerusalem first became Israel's capital over 3,000 years ago when King David captured this hilltop kingdom of the Jebusites. David and all the Israelites marched to Jerusalem, that is Jebus. The Jebusites who lived there said to David, "You will not get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, the city of David. 1 Chronicles chapter 11. It is here to Jerusalem, the city of David, that Day of Discovery's Mart DeHaan and Jimmy DeYoung have come to explore the life and story of Israel's second and most famous ruler, King David.
Jim, that is one good-looking YMCA.
Yes, the Jerusalem International YMCA. YMCA was built here in Jerusalem back in 1929. And for all of these years, it's been a favorite spot for tourists from all over the world who want to come to Jerusalem and have a trip that's more economical. They can stay in the YMCA. It's in the center of the new city of Jerusalem.
Jim says economical, but a lunch or a dinner here is fairly pricey for a YMCA.
For a YMCA. But if you think that's pricey, let me show you something just across the street. The King David Hotel. Probably the most prestigious hotel in all of Israel. King David Hotel precedes the YMCA by about 9 years, built here in 1920. Looks like royalty. You hear what the young lady just said?
No.
It is a very special place. It's probably as apt a description as you could make.
Because the history is as important, and its location.
Yes.
As the marble floors.
From floor to ceiling, you can understand why they call it the King David Hotel.
Yeah. You know what? We probably won't stay here tonight.
We'll stay over at the YMCA. In fact, that is a favorite thing to do for a tourist that comes to Jerusalem. Stay at the YMCA, it's more economical, and then slip over and have a cup of coffee at the King David. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's have a cup of coffee back here.
Okay, great.
Tell a place class, and it's not a paper napkin. Oh, thank you so much.
We're at the King David Hotel because we want to talk about King David, the second king of Israel. And when you travel around Israel today and you see all of the state flags with that Star of David, and then you come to a hotel like this, helps you to understand how important to the identity of the people of Israel David was, King David. And yet when we tell a story, it's important to realize that David wasn't born in a big hotel. He didn't grow up in a palace either. Now what's important about David is to understand where he came from and what his roots really were.
Well, the King David Hotel is a nice place to visit.
I'm far more comfortable with another location, less pretentious and more closely connected with Israel's second king. Here among these rolling, rocky, and terraced hills on the edge of the Judean wilderness, we find the real childhood roots of David. Here, just 5 miles south of Jerusalem, he was born. Here he'd wander for miles with his sheep as he led them to grass and water. Here he learned to use a sling and a stone, sometimes having to fight off wild animals stalking his sheep. And somewhere among these hills, he filled the silence with the sounds of a stringed instrument. Here David reflected on the shepherd of his own heart.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Psalm 23.
Today it's not hard to imagine ancient walls like these acting like a sounding board for a young shepherd who used his time with the sheep to become one of the most accomplished musicians in the land. From these fields where David played his music, Jimmy and I travel a few more rolling miles to the vicinity of Beth Shemesh, where biblical harps are once again being made. Okay, we follow you, Micah? This looks like a workshop.
Would you like to be in here, working?
I'm sure Micah spent a lot of time in here. Yeah. Hey, what was this here? We came through.
This is a door harp. It hangs on the inside of your door, and when it plays, it sounds like this.
I love it.
We make a lot of these, and we ship a lot to America. They make a very special gift.
That's neat. Do they all sound, can I take this off?
Sure.
They all sound the same, or are they different?
A little bit different. They come with different scriptures.
The wind's blowing the wrong way, guys.
There, yeah.
Look at that. Now, what is the inscription here on the bottom?
What is it, Micah? What does it say on the front there?
Blessed are you when you come in, and blessed are you when you go out.
Yeah, that's not bad.
So you personalize each of the harps?
Yeah, each one of them has calligraphy if we want it, or, whatever the customer wants.
Okay.
You ship them all over the world?
We ship them everything, yes.
So
UPS.
So what do you call it?
This is a door harp.
A door harp, okay.
Yeah.
Now, your main business, though, is making the harps for the temple, correct?
Right, yes.
And that would be the 10-string harp?
Yes.
The harp that King David used, is that correct?
Yeah, David himself actually had a harp shop, according to ancient Jewish sources.
Somebody told me that the Jerusalem Post featured an article about you and the harp making that you're involved in, said that you were one who made the first harp in almost 2,000 years here in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I guess we're the ones that restored it. About more than 20 years ago, we were living on the Sea of Galilee, and we began to make the harps, and a journalist for the Jerusalem Post happened to be somewhere in the area and stopped by, and she saw what we were doing and said, wow, we want to write an article. And she wrote an article that went all over the world, and from then on, it's just been very popular.
The rest is history.
Interesting.
Right.
Micah, do we have any idea, what would be the relationship between this kind of harp, the 10-string, and what David might have played? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, he played both of these. He played the Neville and he played the Kinnor. He played the 22-string and the 10-string instrument.
Okay, how do we know that?
It's in the Torah.
It's in the
Tanakh and the ancient Jewish writings.
All right.
We don't have exact designs, although our 22-string harp came from, the general idea came from a 3,000-year-old sculpture. Actually, it was a stone figure in Megiddo. So we're just basically picking up the tradition. It's the, it's the restoration of the tabernacle of David. The end of days, the fulfillment of the prophecy. And actually, when we began the 10-stringed harp, after a little while, we got a visit from a very Orthodox rabbi and historian type, and he came in and he said that, "I heard that you were building the 10-stringed harp." And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, do you know the significance of that?" And I said, "No." And he said that it's very special because it's said in our ancient writings that when the harp of 10 strings returns to Israel, it'll be the times that of the Messiah. And it's said that, I think the quote is that the 10-stringed harp will be reserved for the day when all people live together as one and worship in the same place together. So we feel a part of it. This is our part of the Torah.
As Micah took us around the workshop, he showed us how they make the harps, often using wood that is native to the Middle East. He took special pleasure in explaining how a harp could be used to play the words of Scripture. According to Micah, a harp of 22 strings corresponds to the Hebrew alphabet of 22 letters. He said the ancients assigned each string a Hebrew letter, so that each letter then became a specific tone that enabled the musician to play notes corresponding to the actual words of Scripture. Micah also made a point of reminding us of the Jewish belief that harp music is therapeutic, which would make David's playing the harp to quiet Saul's troubled soul an ancient form of spiritual and emotional therapy.
And so it was, whenever the Spirit from God was upon Saul, that David would take a harp and play it with his hand. Then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit would depart from him. 1 Samuel chapter 16.
You know what? I hear your wife playing the harp.
Yeah.
Can we go over and
Sure.
and see her?
Go on over to the workshop.
You know, I think for the first time I'm really understanding the story of David and Saul. It's almost like you can feel your spirit being lifted by the harp.
So soothing.
That's
The
beautiful.
sound.
Oh, thank you.
Shoshana, thank you so
Yeah.
much for playing it.
As we listened to Shoshana play the harp, we saw how a creative person like David could have become so absorbed in his music. As musicians know, once you've technically mastered a musical piece, it almost comes to master you. First, you learn to play with precision and skill, but then comes the day when you understand that for that music to truly communicate, it has to become a part of you. Composer and arranger Don Wurtzen describes the creative soul of David, David the harpist and writer of so many of the Psalms.
David was the most imaginative, the most creative, the most artistic person in the Bible. We can learn a lot from King David. We in the modern world love science. We love logic. We don't have a great predilection, a great bent toward the arts. David was an artistic person, and we can learn a lot from David. He was an incredible artist who loved the Lord his God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength.
In a song of David recorded in Psalm 9, he wrote, "I will praise you, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will tell of all your marvelous works. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High."
He was a man who was a brilliant musician. He was a poet in his heart. But combined with that, he was a military genius and a great administrator. And he was very gifted with words, not only in writing poetry, but in his relationships with people. So we can learn an awful lot from David. And he's the greatest king in probably the history of the world. And fortunately, he left us a hymnal filled with words that the Lord gave to him that can help us today in the modern world when we're hurting, when we're facing mystery and things we can't put together. He can help us a lot.
Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear. What can flesh do to me? Psalm 56.
It was while David was still a young shepherd that during a moment of national crisis, his trust in God was tested. Not far from the harp factory, Jimmy and I wandered through the famous Elah Valley, where David met a Philistine giant named Goliath. We walked along the ancient creek bed that gave David the stones for his sling and tried to imagine what it would have been like to be there on that day.
Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." 1 Samuel chapter 17.
David was just a boy when he killed Goliath, and yet from this valley floor, he rose quickly to national prominence. With the fame, however, came jealousy. King Saul now saw David as a threat to his throne and repeatedly tried to kill him. But even as the armies of Saul chased David through the wilderness, David sought his refuge in God.
Have mercy on me, O God, have mercy on me, for in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. Psalm 57.
And the disaster did pass. Upon the death of King Saul and his 3 sons, David became Israel's second king.
We're here in the ancient city of David that was actually captured by King David and his mighty men almost 3,000 years ago. The city of David is about a 10-acre plot that is shaped like an arrowhead between 2 valleys, the Kidron Valley to the left and the Hinnom Valley to the right. It leads up to Mount Moriah, where David would purchase the threshing floor from Ornan the Jebusite. He actually paid cash money for this very sacred piece of real estate for the Jewish people. You have the Mount of Olives over here, which looks across to Mount Moriah in the city of David. And behind us would be the new city of Jerusalem, location now, which is the capital city. Actually, King David, with his mighty men 3,000 years ago, established this Jebusite stronghold as the capital city. Joab went up the water pipe and his mighty men were able to capture the city. Not too long after that David went to Kiryat Yarim, gathered the Ark of the Covenant. He brought it here to the city of David, referred to in the scriptures, the Old Testament record of it, as Zion, city of David, and Jerusalem. He brought the Ark of the Covenant back to this location, which established then this city as the spiritual capital for the Jewish people as well. Later on, his son, King Solomon, would build the temple to house the Ark of the Covenant there on Mount Moriah.
Hey Jim, look here once. Let's look down, look across the valley. It's the modern Arab village of Silwa. But what I was doing is looking down into the rooftops. You see that people are hanging their wash out there. You see other people sitting in the shade on the other side. And it reminds us of something that goes beyond David's establishment of the kingdom here at the city of David. You know the story well. One night he was on the rooftop. His men were off to war. And he looked down just like this, and you can see how he could have looked down onto the top of a house. And he saw the beautiful Bathsheba bathing herself. She was another man's wife. He took her and entered into an adulterous relationship, and then King David, a man who's described as a man after God's own heart, arranged for the death of her husband, Uriah, one of his own generals. It was a turning point in David's life. Prior to that, you see it building, establishing his kingdom, being the spiritual leader of Israel. But it reminds us that no matter how great a man is, there's the human weakness. And when a great man gives in to the weakness of his own flesh, things begin to unravel. You read the biblical account of David after this, and it really is a downward spiral. David has made choices that he will pay dearly for, his family will pay dearly for, the nation would pay for. And we can see how it happened right here, looking over the city of David onto the rooftops of these houses built down below.
While David would have to suffer the consequences of his sin, he poured out his heart to God, and his words are recorded for us in Psalm 51.
Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only, have I sinned, and done this evil in your sight. Psalm 51.
And for one final perspective on the life of King David, we move to another view of the city of David, just across the Kidron Valley.
From this vantage point here on the southern end of the Mount of Olives, I can see all the way to the King David Hotel, behind it the tower for the YMCA. That's where we started earlier. From this vantage point as well, we can see the geography of the city that King David captured with his mighty men, the Jebusite stronghold. The road over to my left, we come down through the Hinnom Valley, that valley that I was talking about. Then to the right, you have the Kidron Valley making its way, and they meet together as the point of the arrowhead of the city of David comes together with these two valleys. From this vantage point as well, you can see up the slopes to Mount Moriah, the location of Ornan the Jebusite's threshing floor, which King David purchased. Later, his son would build a temple there, the first temple. And then after the Jews returned from their time in the Babylonian captivity, they came back and built a second temple there, which was Herod's temple, located there at the time of Jesus Christ. The Bible records a future for the Temple Mount, for another temple, and as well for King David.
And so there's a lot to learn from the story of David. David tells us about our God, tells us a lot about ourselves. When a man of the highest character gives in to his own human inclinations, it shows that our hope and our confidence has to be in someone greater. Like a small tree growing out of the ground, God gave David his life. God took him from being a shepherd boy looking after the sheep and turned him into a man who embodied the character and the hopes of the nation of Israel. And just like that tree at some point began to bend and turn, David also had a time in his life, as we've seen, where his own soul became twisted and curved by choices that he made. And yet, when I look at that curved tree and when I think about the story of David, I realize what that says about me, about my own inclinations. In the best of times, I'm in danger of giving in to desires that can ruin my life and ruin the lives of others. And that's why it's so important to follow the story of David beyond his own life and times, into the day when another man walked into the city of Jerusalem, and he was called the Son of David. In fact, when he came into this city, throngs of people praising him, taking palm branches, throwing them down on the ground, saying, "Bless God. May the kingdom of our father David be blessed, and so be blessed the one who comes in his name." That man did what David, the king of Israel, could never do. He came not only in behalf of God, but as God, to show the love of the Creator for those who had become lost in their own ways. That man gave his life, a perfect life, a life so much greater than King David, the great king of Israel. That man, even more than King David, tells us about ourselves, our need of him, and the God who calls us to himself.